Yeah, fashionably late.
All right, and if you heard that part, like Bill said, I was fashionably late, had some technical difficulties, but welcome to episode 61 of the Fantasy Timeline, a proud member of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network. I'm Josh at Real Fantasy TL. I'm with my main man, Bill at Super Duperflex. Bill, how you doing, man?
Dude, doing good. Happy to get to the 9 point scoring season. It's a whole new dynamic, and just, you know, looking forward to doing something different, I guess. How are
Yeah,
you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing really good. And one of the reasons why I'm doing really well is because we have our DAP Network brother with us, Guestin. He's with us tonight. It is Rocky Petrella at Dynasty FF Addict. Rocky, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, guys. I appreciate you having me on. You're two of my favorite guys to podcast with. Really looking forward to tonight, and I'm really looking forward to something Josh is going to get into later that we talked about pre-show.
Oh yes, that's the good part, but we'll get there when we get there. I'm with Bill as a Dynasty guy. This is the part of the season that I decompress usually for a couple weeks, but then once that decompression is done, I get rejuvenated. You know, you start maybe looking at startups. You look at the teams you already have and try to figure out, as you guys said on the Trade Addicts Pod, Rocky, as Gabe said, actually try to figure out where it all went wrong. And
Yeah,
you starting to concoct trades and send them out, and there's new blood in some of your leagues, and it's just a fun time for all that kind of stuff. So now that we've done our introductions, we're gonna do our good, our bad, and our ugly. Probably the last one until the 2021 season starts, because there's not
Oh,
going to be
yeah.
games going on. But
The Pro Bowl, right?
there's not going to be games going on. So
Yeah, I know.
we're gonna start with the good, bad, the ugly. Bill, why don't you start us off with your good?
All right. My good was Cam Newton. He actually had a game for once. I think he was like 68% passing, 240 yards, 3 touchdowns. Then he had 11 carries for like 80 yards. And, those 3 touchdowns that he threw this week gave him a total of 8 for the season. So it just shows you, like, he basically almost threw 50% of his touchdowns this week. So we may as well just say, hey, congratulations, you went out with a bang. We'll see, where you're backing up someone next year.
that's like good mixed with the ugly when you put it like that.
Yeah, just to give the to give context as to why it is good, because that's way good compared to what he's done all year. So he did score a ton of fantasy points if you were playing in any sort of week 17. So ooh, look at that. You got a good comment in there. Yeah, it's that's who my good is. I mean, but yeah, like you said, it is kind of mixed in with some poor or negativity towards him too. That's how I roll.
Do you guys think he's a starter next year?
No, I don't think so.
I had heard something, and I don't know if this was from a fake Adam Schefter account because I didn't see it myself, but something about Washington wanting to bring him in. So, I mean,
Rivera.
like that could be a thing. I mean, Alex Smith may retire no matter what happens this season. I think he came out and he proved himself, and proved that he's fully back. It was amazing what he did this year. But if he's gone, they don't have Haskins anymore. I mean, they'll have Kyle Allen and what else? I mean, what else? Yeah, I see what you're laughing at, Bill. So yeah. So I mean, I guess he could go into a situation like that where there's not many options, and kind of like the Patriots were. They only had Jarrett Stidham and nothing else really, and okay, there's probably going to be a situation or two like that in the NFL. He could land there, but yeah, I can't imagine him being much more than a backup at this point in his career. So we'll see what happens. But Rocky, why don't you hit us with your good?
Yeah, my good was the rookie bust out games we saw in week 17. I was really happy to see that Jerry Jeudy with the 5 for 140, I think a 90-yard touchdown, and especially my two boys Dobbins and JT busting out. Each I think had 2 touchdowns. Dobbins I think had 160 yards, and Jonathan Taylor going for 253 I think it was. So yeah, I love that. Good luck buying them anywhere at this point now. So but yeah, I mean, and JT was my guy through the whole, draft process, pre-draft, post-draft. Everyone was on CH. We've kind of seen that go by the wayside a little bit. He's kind of now like the 4th or 5th running back of these rookies where he probably should have been to begin with. And but yeah, and to see JT, this was coming. I mean, he'd been building up to this, and you're waiting to see him kind of go full beast mode, which he did this week, and I loved seeing it.
Yeah, we talked about 2020 being the year that people entered way too many startups because of quarantine and everything, and I think you're going to see people entering a lot of startups just to get their hands on a JT share or J.K. Dobbins share or something like that because like you said, Rocky, you ain't buying them nowhere unless you plan on trading half your team away. So
yeah, we talked on Trade Addicts this week about the ADP for January, one quarterback, and he's at 103. So.
Yeah, that's a little ambitious in my opinion. I was actually just going to bring that up about the round 1. I mean, I love JT, but it's just, it's hard to there's so many other guys that are established that I feel so much better about that, but he is the rookie running back that showed the most, right? I mean, there's nobody else that is in that same situation, and if you want to grab one of those young running backs, I mean, I don't think 103 is going to be a reality thing. Sometimes in mock drafts, people are, and depending on when they did it, if something's fresh in their mind, like a 250-yard game, sometimes that'll push somebody way up. So, but it'll be interesting to see where he lands, after the rookie class and everything. I mean, I think he's a late first round pick entering next year.
I'm with you. I think he's a first, and I think he might even be a mid first, just because people are going to see not only the 250 plus yard game. Obviously, that's that leaves a lasting impression. But he's had a good little run the last 3 weeks of the season, and how biased we are when we see end of season stat. Even when we talk about someone like Tyler Lockett, who ended up wide receiver 10 or something like that, but it's really based off of 2 huge games and a lot of, but you go, oh, he was wide receiver 8. I got it, and we sometimes don't do that week by week breakdown to see what a guy was really doing for you throughout the season and realizing oh, for 12 weeks, Tyler Lockett was, pissing me off. And the other 4 weeks, sure, you love to have him on your team, but we play, we talk about 2-3 years into the future, but at the end of the day, it's a week-to-week game. So, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think JT will go pretty high because of the recency bias, as we'll say. So my good, Josh Allen, 18 for 25, 224 yards and 3 touchdowns. And people might say, wow, that's a pretty good game. That was the first half for Josh Allen. He was then promptly pulled because they had secured the victory at halftime and they didn't need to go out there and get Josh Allen hurt. So yeah, that's my guy. That's the guy I'm going with because, I mean, has there been a bigger ascent in fantasy this year than Josh Allen? I mean, I took him as a QB2 in a 14-team superflex, and people were saying that I was too high on him, and now I'm sure I could turn Josh Allen, a late second round pick into a second round startup, into multiple assets if I decided to sell him because he's top 2, top 3 quarterback on a lot of people's QB list for Dynasty. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, man. I mean, I can't think of anybody that I would say is close to that. I think that, like, I was probably one of them that when you selected him in our startup, Superflex Army 2 startup, I thought that was a little high. I didn't think it was like crazy high, but I thought it was high.
Right.
But I mean, obviously, like, he's improved every year, and he's obviously working on his craft and he's learning. Sometimes, like, that's an underrated thing. You get these quarterbacks coming from maybe smaller schools who don't have. You see the guy's got the, like, physical tools, but he might not have gotten the coaching that these guys that play at these big schools get. So, he has the opportunity to learn and, improve every year, where a lot of these guys come in so refined that, they're not going to be able to take that huge jump typically, and so he's just been one of those guys that's shown that he's willing to learn and willing to work on it. And I mean, now he's, he was number 2 in at least in most of my leagues for quarterbacks and points per game. Kyler beat him out by decimal points. So, yeah, man, it was a pretty incredible season for him, no doubt.
And he probably got the offensive coordinator Brian Dable a head coaching job somewhere by the time the coaching carousel is all said and done. So that'll be interesting as we go into the offseason and we start discussing what head coaches are going to do and how they're going to affect things. That'll probably be a name that we're talking about. So I'll go ahead. I'll double up here. I'll take the snake here, the turn on the snake here. Zach Ertz, 3 receptions, 16 yards. Okay. I mean, that was pretty bad considering the Eagles didn't dress Alshon Jeffrey, didn't dress Dallas Goedert, didn't dress Miles Sanders. There probably is a name or two I'm forgetting about as well. He looked like he was going to be maybe the number 1 option in a game that
Well, Josh, in case you hadn't heard, Nate Sudfeld was throwing to him for a quarter.
That's true. I mean, that is actually the entire reason why Zach Ertz did poorly. But he's a name that I don't think will be back in Philly next year. The Eagles have a ton of they're like $70 million over the cap or something like that. They're going to have to try to figure that out. And I think Zach Ertz, along with a lot of other guys that the names of, are probably going to be not on the Eagles anymore. So it'll be interesting to see where he lands. I was talking to a buddy of mine today, and I said maybe he ends up in Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence throwing him the ball, and they have other weapons where he can just kind of go over the middle, catch some balls. He's got good hands and get some stats on a offense that should be pretty good. What do you guys think about Ertz?
I kind of like him as somebody that you could probably buy fairly cheap at this point with how bad this year was. And I agree. I don't think there's any way he's going to be back in Philly for the reasons you said. Goddard's already here, the cap issues. And I don't know what the hell happened this year. I still have trouble believing he's washed up at 29. I mean, I guess he'll be 30 next year, but I definitely think a change of scenery. I don't expect him to be, in the top 3 or 4 like he was, but I definitely think you could see him just in that next tier next year. And I don't think anybody's going to ask too much for him at this point. So I kind of like him as a guy to buy low in the off season if you can. Maybe get him thrown in a bigger deal or something like that. I'm not really chasing him, but I think he's a guy that's going to be a value next year.
I love that idea, especially in tight end premium leagues. I mean, he's probably going to be on the cheap because if the Ertz owner held him all year, he was pissed off at Ertz all year. So he may just want to kick him off his roster and go another direction. So that's going to be an interesting development once we see where he lands and who's throwing the ball to him. So, Bill, why don't you hit us with your bad?
Yeah, my bad was A.J. Dillon, 1 carry for 3 yards. And it's not so much that he got 1 carry for 3 yards specifically. It's just more the fact that the week before he had gotten so many touches. And then, a lot of people were hoping that, that was going to be a build-up to show something for maybe his role next year. And then you get into this game, and, it was a pretty big... I might be already blacking out from this weekend, but they won pretty handily, didn't they?
Yeah, I think it was like 35-16 or something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, like, even with that opportunity for A.J. Dillon to get more touches in a game that maybe didn't matter quite as much, or at least a half that didn't matter as much, and he didn't really get any touches. So that would be my biggest just concern, just because of that. And maybe people getting a little too excited the week before just kind of need to take a step back a little bit.
Yeah, and that's an interesting spot too, because Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones are both free agents, so it's going to be interesting to see if they decide to sign either one of those guys, or maybe even both those guys. Who knows? But yeah, I saw a lot of people after that big game from A.J. Dillon who are big A.J. Dillon fans saying this might be the time to sell him, because his value got so high off of that game. And I mean, he did look great in that game, but his value got so high that it was probably like, maybe we should look about selling him and see what happens. But all right, that was a good one. Rocky, why don't you hit us with your bad?
Yeah, my bad was Teddy Bridgewater. Not that we expect a ton out of him, but he went 13 for 23, 176 yards, 2 picks. I believe he got benched for PJ Walker at one point, who also threw 3 picks himself, by the way. And the reason I kind of singled him out for this bad segment is just that he was a guy I was a little higher on than most coming into the year. I thought he could be a QB1, a low-end QB1. A lot of it was based on the talent around him and Joe Brady. And I just wanted to mention it because and it also goes to the point of our favorite preseason QB discussion of Drew Lock, that just not to get too caught up in the situation for some of these quarterbacks when you don't really know that they're that good. So Locke was more of a question mark. Teddy had pretty much shown he was nothing great his career. He's serviceable but nothing great. And I think on both of them I got a little too caught up in the DJ Moores and the Cortland Suttons and Noah Fant and all that stuff. And the coaching was part of it. I think in both teams I was a little high with the Shermer coaching Locke and Brady coaching Bridgewater and all this stuff. And so I think it's kind of a lesson I learned this year, and it's just kind of signified by this horrible Teddy game this week. That you got to weigh more at least I did have to weigh more the talent that they are, instead of just taking so much of the surrounding talent and coaching into account.
And that's going to be an interesting situation, because the Panthers have a top 10 pick. Do they maybe try to trade up to get Fields or Zach Wilson? Do they stay pat and see if Trey Lance falls to them? Do they completely avoid QB in round 1 and maybe go for a Kyle Trask or Mac Jones in round 2? That's going to be really interesting to see what ends up happening with that situation, because Teddy had some flashes, but they have a high-powered offense. They have Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey, Ian Thomas,
Curtis Samuel.
Curtis Samuel's a free agent.
He's a free agent. That's
so
right.
That'll be interesting to see. I don't think they have the cap to re-sign him, but I mean, the cap is kind of a myth, even though everyone who works in the NFL says the cap isn't a myth. But if you can give Patrick Mahomes $500 million when you have $187 in cap, it's a myth. So Rocky, why don't you hit us with your ugly?
And my ugly was just the debacle of the Bengals passing game this past week. They had I know it's Brandon Allen, but still they had 48 yards. Which, I mean, are we in 1952 here? That's gross yards too. That doesn't even take account. I don't know what it was with sacks factored in there, but yeah, I think T. Higgins was shut out, and Tyler Boyd had like one catch. I mean, I'm not. There's a lot of fantasy relevance, I guess, to take out of this because Brandon Allen isn't anything we were depending on. Just Joe Burrow, please come back week 1.
Well, and the crazy thing is that I was talking to a buddy about this. We were talking about QB situations, and it's amazing. Obviously, I'm a Cowboys fan. The Cowboys went out during the offseason. They signed Andy Dalton as backup, and ended up needing him for the majority of the season. The Eagles, your team, Rocky, they went out, used the second round pick on Jalen Hurts to secure a backup position. Carson Wentz ends up not playing well for most of the season. He's out there starting, and Bill, don't mean to dump on you, but the Lions backup quarterback situation, which was needed in a couple of games, didn't look very good. So it's important sometimes that, that backup quarterback, we kind of just go, it's whatever, it's only if the quarterback gets hurt. But I mean, we see in the league every year, how many quarterbacks went down this year, even if it was just for a game or two, and you needed the backup out there. So, high end backups are kind of important, and they're important to your fantasy team because if you have a Nick Mullen on your team, you might be able to trade him for way more than what you had to pay to get him, or an Andy Dalton or a Jalen Hurts, who now might be the starter. It might be even more valuable than you thought he was at the beginning of the season. So yeah, they just suck without Joe Burrow. And yeah, I'm with you, Rocky. Let's get him back ASAP.
I know.
We don't have to watch that hot garbage anymore. But Bill, what's your ugly, man?
Just to follow up a little bit on that is that, it's nice to have like a really good backup, but how many teams actually do have that? I mean, there's probably 5 in the league that you could say, yeah, I'm comfortable with that guy. I mean, the rest of the guys are just guys that either know a system or a guy that can at least go out there and call the plays, like other than that, I mean, it's like every team doesn't have a good starter, let alone any backup. So it's just something that's like an incredible thing to have if you can get one. And, I mean, the Lions at previous times had actually had a pretty decent backup. But it's just like, okay, they got to put that money somewhere to make their team actually starters good, and that's the challenge is like we can't spend, X percent on a guy that's not going to be out there every week. So, teams that have that depth or they focus on making sure that they have those quarterbacks, they're the ones that are going to reap the rewards. And, maybe that's something that more teams do need to do. But my ugly is, it's just kind of more of like the whole season type of thing with Tua. I don't know if this is just what the Dolphins are doing. Like they're just, he's been super passive, it feels like. Like, I mean, there was the one game he had 17 completions for like under 100 yards. Like, it's just crazy. Like, so many short passes. And I don't know if it's like he's tentative. He's coming back from an injury, all that kind of stuff. Not everybody's going to be Justin Herbert out of the gate. And so, like, maybe this is a process that they have with him, but like he didn't look good this week, and now there's rumors of, or at least certain people talking about maybe they look for a quarterback with the Texans first round pick at 3, and maybe that's something that they do. I'm not sure that's something that they're. I don't think they should do it. I mean, he's obviously just. He just a year ago he had a major hip injury. Like that was I think November of last year. So, I mean, maybe this is just a part of the process, and he's still not seeing things. Things haven't slowed down for him because obviously when they put Fitzpatrick in, he looks like, he's such the opposite of Tua at the moment. So maybe, I mean, I think that Tua is going to actually be a bargain this offseason. Like, I'm going to take risk on. If anybody's uneasy with him, I'm going after him in Superflex, no doubt.
Yeah,
I actually.
Go ahead, Rocky. Go ahead, Rocky.
I was just gonna say I actually am a little uneasy. Just I mean, just because we haven't seen a ton from him this year, and just probability wise, the fact that all three of these guys, I think we already think Burrow and what we've seen from Burrow and Herbert tells us they're really good. The idea that all three of these guys are going to be really good, I just don't know how likely that is. Just looking at past quarterback drafts and things like that, anyway, just taking the specific evaluation of Tua out of it. But I don't think I agree with you, though. I don't think there's any way, though, they're going to go for another quarterback. I think that's insane. I know people talk about what happened with Rosen, but they had a whole new coaching staff coming in with his own specific system that he was known for and all this stuff. I don't think there's any way they abandoned the 5th overall pick after one. And it's not like he was horrible. I mean, Rosen played a lot worse than Tua did that first year. So, but yeah, I don't hate buying them either if you can get them. You're definitely going to get them well cheaper than you're going to get Burrow or Herbert. And we've definitely seen plenty of quarterbacks who've been worse. Like Goff was way worse than Tua was year one, and is panned out to at least be a QB, low end QB1, high end QB2 in fantasy most years. So it's definitely not a bad risk worth taking.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on the part, Bill, you said about now there's reports coming out and the people are talking maybe they should take a quarterback. I'm wondering if this is a classic, and I say classic under Brian Flores, Miami Dolphins draft smokescreen. They did this last year where they were like, we might take Herbert, we might not take Tua, and people really started.
They should have taken Herbert.
I mean, in hindsight, yes, they should have taken Herbert, but the whole thing was like maybe they don't really like Tua, and then then it comes out, then they make the pick and it's Tua, and it was Tua the whole time, and they weren't even thinking about Herbert. They should have been, but this might be a thing again where especially if the Jets kind of decide that at 2 Fields is not the guy, they'd rather stick with Darnold and maybe draft Penei Sewell. Maybe they're just trying to build up this value to make a trade at 3 to someone who is looking for a quarterback and kind of up the price a little bit by telling everyone, well, we could draft a quarterback. Tua wasn't that good. I think Tua is their guy, and they're going to stick with him for more than a year, but got to try to bring it up.
I'll be honest with you. I think that this is just Twitter talk. You know what I mean? Like somebody brought it up, and I don't even know. I mean, maybe it was the Dolphins doing it, but I think that this is exceptionally early for that to be the case. But maybe they think they're the smartest guy in the room, so they're trying to get it out there early. But I think it's more people like maybe people in the media, and somebody reads something and then it kind of goes through the echo chamber of Twitter, and all of a sudden it's a topic that maybe isn't worthy of it. But we'll see. I mean, I guarantee that will end up happening throughout draft season. We see it every year with many teams. Some are better at it than others, though, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting, too, to see how these quarterbacks fall. I mean, we all pretty much know Lawrence is going to Jacksonville, but the Jets, there's a question, will they keep Darnold or won't they? Miami, like I said, we don't necessarily expect to take one. Atlanta, maybe, but maybe not. Cincinnati's at 5. They're not taking a quarterback. The Eagles are at 6. I don't think they're taking a quarterback. So I'm curious to see how this shakes out. I'm sure somebody's going to trade up into at least one of those spots, but it's interesting to see because a lot of the teams at the very tippy top don't seem to look like teams that would go for a quarterback.
Yeah, this is a very interesting year in the draft. Usually the top 5, there's usually, 2 or 3 teams that are locked in to wanting to take a quarterback. And this year, maybe you say it doesn't start until 9 with Denver might be the first team that you're really, I mean, besides obviously number 1 in Lawrence, number 9 might be the next team that you really go, they're definitely, in the market for trying to take a quarterback. So it's going to be interesting, especially when you have a lot of teams in that like 11 to 16 range, like New England, San Francisco, who might all want to move up to grab quarterback. It's going to be fun to see during the draft what's going on. All right, so I'm going to go with my ugly here. And my ugly is Giants fans, players, and other people bitching about the Eagles losing. All right, first of all, stop it. the Eagles did what they had to do what is best for their team. You know who else did it and no one bitched about it? The Kansas City Chiefs. You know who else did it and no one bitched about it? The Pittsburgh Steelers. No one bitched about it. And I'm sorry, Saquon Barkley tweeted, could someone help me make sense to me? I don't understand. Saquon, I'm going to make it real clear for you because I know you listen. Your team started the season 0-5. 0-5. You know how many teams have made the playoffs after starting 0-5? Probably like 2 in the history of the league. All right. So that's one reason. Reason number 2, you guys had 6 wins on the season. You know how many teams above 500 you beat? 1. 1 out of your 6 wins was against a team over 500. 4 of your 6 wins were against the NFC East, which is historically the worst division to ever play the game of football. Okay. So don't sound confused that the Philadelphia Eagles didn't take pity on your crap team and win one for the Giants. The Eagles don't care. You know what the Eagles cared about? Moving up to the 6th pick. I don't blame them because they did what Pittsburgh and Kansas City did. They did what was best for their team, and what was best for their team was moving up 3 spots in the draft. Guess what? I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. I don't agree with the Philadelphia Eagles on practically anything. But you know what? They didn't do a damn thing wrong. You know what you could have done? You could have won a couple more games. You only had to make it to 8-8 for this to not even freaking matter. But you didn't do it. Your team was garbage. And if you played in any other division besides the NFC East, you guys would have been talking about the draft 3 weeks ago. So you know what? Be thankful that you made it to week 17 with a chance. And don't be mad at the Eagles. Joe Judge, we're never going to do that. We're never going to quit in the game. Blah, blah. Guess what? Your team looked like hot garbage 10 games this year, okay? So you're not exactly like coach of the year. You didn't do anything. You had a 6-10 team, all right? You know what? We talked about backup quarterbacks. The Eagles got Jalen Hurts. Dallas got Andy Dalton. Your master plan was to get Colt McCoy, and you had to start him in a game, and he looked like trash because you know what? He's just not a good NFL player. I hate to say it, but it's the truth. So you know what? If I hope that makes sense to Saquon and everyone else out there, and guess what? I think you said it, Rocky, on the Trade Addicts. If this had been a 4:25 game, no one would have given a crap. If this had been a 1 o'clock game, no one would have given a crap. But because you saw it on prime time, everyone's like, I saw someone say this is the most disgraceful thing that ever happened to the NFL. Are you
Giants fan?
Most likely. Are you kidding me with all of the black eyes that the NFL have had? And we can go on a whole podcast alone on all the black eyes that the NFL has had. This doesn't even rank in the top 1,000. Okay. So you know what? Try to be better than 6-10 before you start complaining about not making the playoffs. So
I want to thank you for that, and I just a couple of things I pointed out on Trade Addicts as well, which is that Jacksonville was doing the exact same thing, starting inferior quarterbacks for weeks, and nobody gave a crap, so that they could get Trevor Lawrence over Gardner Minshew, and the thing that boggles my mind the most, and I was arguing with people for this for like 2 days on Twitter, is that I heard from the same people who thought this was a disgrace that if Sudfeld had started the game, that would be fine. So if you tank harder by starting your worst quarterback for 4 quarters, that's cool. But if you start your better quarterback for 3 quarters and then put the other one in, that's horrible and a disgrace to the game. That makes literally, I don't know the mental gymnastics that's needed to make that make sense.
Well, and Rocky, I'm glad you brought that up because we were all cheering the Jets on when they were 0-13. They're doing it the right way. They're going to get Trevor Lawrence.
We laughed at them for winning.
And then we told them they were idiots for winning the game. Well, why did you win? We saw that game against Las Vegas where they went zero blitz to allow Henry Ruggs to catch a 40-yard touchdown. And we were like, oh, God, thank God they did that. They almost won that game. Then they go out the next week and they beat LA. Then they win the next game and kick themselves totally out of the first pick. Oh, and by the way, talking about backup quarterbacks, here's an interesting one to all the people that are like mad that the best players aren't playing in the game. The Jets that I just talked about. Do you know? And I had to look this up because I thought that maybe I was high and I wasn't seeing what I was actually seeing. Joe Flacco was better per game in yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and QBR than Sam Darnold. But you know what the Jets did? They trotted Sam Darnold out there for 12 games and said, you're the guy we're going to lose with because guess what? That Joe
All
Flacco,
right. I think that's the most ridiculous argument that you could make.
No,
like that is it's totally ridiculous because he's their starting quarterback, and just because a veteran did well for a few games so that his average looks better than Sam Darnold's, I agree the point overall about it's ridiculous to argue it, but I think that argument of Flacco over Darnold is ludicrous.
No, it's not, because if you're telling me the best players are supposed to play the game, Joe Flacco was better than Sam Darnold. And guess what? The Eagles did the same damn thing.
So Boston Scott should play over Miles Sanders, or, you know, like because he has a better
yards per game, touchdowns.
Oh my God.
Like, come on.
Like, let's move on. This is ridiculous.
No, it's not ridiculous.
It's totally ridiculous.
Don't say you want the best players to play the game.
He's not the best. Just statistics do not prove that a player's better than another player, and when you're taking such a small sample size, and you have a quarterback who's played 15 years and he is just more aggressive as whole. Like he hasn't been tenderized under the hand of Adam Gase, where Flacco is less impaired from the Gase destruction. So, like, that's a ludicrous argument in my opinion.
No, because teams do it all the time. The Eagles did it. Carson Wentz played like trash. They brought in Jalen Hurts to play the last 4 games, or 3 3/4, whatever you want to call it. Like,
Can we move on from this topic? We spent like 10 minutes on it.
Well, yeah, we spent 10 minutes on it because people were losing their minds about a team.
You're losing your mind on Joe Flacco.
Well, listen, the stats are the stats. You can say I'm losing my mind, but he played
So better. Adrian Peterson is better than DeAndre Swift because he has more yards this season than DeAndre Swift.
Well, I mean, it's not about
correct.
Right, but guess what? Adrian Peterson still played more. So obviously Detroit thought he was better. Like he played
a role, and that's why they're 5-11.
Right, and running back is different when you're starting 2 or 3 guys, or you're playing 2 or 3 guys a game than quarterback is. I mean, no one except for maybe Washington is playing 2 or 3 quarterbacks a game. So
okay.
I just must say I very much enjoyed that. I rarely see Bill and Josh go at it so heavily.
Well, that's just ludicrous in my mind.
Well, you know, Bill and I agree on a lot, and we're friendly with each other. But you know, Bill and I both also enjoy the times that we get to go at each other, because we don't do it that often.
No, we really don't.
So when we go at each other, you know, we go at each other hard. But he's my brother. At the end of the day, I love him. He knows that, and he knows that.
This is our last show.
All right, guys. Well, it was a great episode 61. We made it a long way.
We're gonna have Dustin and Josh on Dynasty Junkies.
So, Rocky, you get Bill. Good luck with that. He likes to argue a lot, apparently. So, no, that was a good one, though. So we're gonna move it to the timeline. What we saw on the timeline. So this first one here is from to Utah at Steve Sanders 600. 10-team, 1 QB dynasty, half PPR. Which side do you like here? Alvin Kamara or Justin Jefferson and the 207? Rocky, since you're our guest, why don't we start with you first?
Yeah, this was kind of a tough one. They're both, I think, at least by DLF ADP, first round startup guys at this point. And I think I have to go the Jefferson side. Kamara, age as much as anything, and I'm not an ageist guy, but Kamara is going into his 5th year, I believe. I do think he probably will last a little longer than some running backs just because he's not an in-between the tackles guy. He's not taking that beating. But that's still a concern that he's this far along. And also, the thing that really swung me is that we could see Taysom Hill. I really believe Taysom Hill could be their starting quarterback next year. And we saw that mostly did not go well for Kamara this season. And I'm just the whole quarterback uncertainty has me worried. Jefferson, I think, has Cousins for a little while himself, and so I definitely don't see Jefferson tailing off crazily. And we've got years of Jefferson. He's going to be super high value. He could be the wide receiver 1 if he approaches anywhere near the numbers he had this year. So I think at this time next year, it's almost a certainty to me. And also just Kamara, I mean, is not going to repeat this season just because most running backs aren't going to repeat this season. He was the easy RB1. And I think the value is going to be on the Jefferson side, and you're getting, not that the pick is super high, but you're getting a pick with it too. So.
Yeah. Bill, what do you think about this trade?
Yes, I agree with Rocky. I think that I'm going to go with the young wide receiver that just broke all rookie records. And I love this show.
Yeah, I actually thought I was going to be in the minority in this one, but both you guys agree with me here. I'm with Justin Jefferson in the pick as well. Like you said, Rocky, we've seen what he did year 1 with no off season, no, just kind of getting thrown to the wolves. And I mean, the first, 3 games, I mean, there was really nothing. And then all of a sudden he just blew up. And I think over his last 14 games, he averaged over 100 yards a game, which is ridiculous. And that's with Adam Thielen there. And Adam Thielen doesn't get a lot of respect, but he is a very good NFL wide receiver. But he's older, and I feel over the next 2 years, he's probably not going to be on Minnesota anymore. So, I mean, if you have Justin Jefferson there with a lesser second option than Adam Thielen, I mean, the ceiling could even be slightly higher. So he's going to be fun to watch. If you have him on your team, he's another guy that you're not getting rid of under any circumstance, like the rookie running backs we spoke about earlier. But yeah, if you can get him and a 207 for Alvin Kamara, let's go. Do that deal and get Justin Jefferson on your team. Bill's still cracking up if you're listening to this in podcast form. He's still laughing all the chat.
I feel like I smoked weed. I'm just laughing so much.
Bill's high apparently.
I'm not high, but I feel like I am.
Well, that's what I'll do to you once I start down my road. I'll get you laughing and giggling and having a good time. But all right, we're gonna move on to the next one. This is from Tyler Belowski. Sorry, Tyler, I probably butchered that. At Tyler Belowski. So it looks like he's doing a hot take for every day of the year. This was his hot take for the 4th of January. Zeke Elliott will finish as the RB1 next year in all formats. And as a Dallas Cowboys fan, I will say that I totally do not agree with this. Being the RB1 in fantasy, I mean, you need to have a special season. And while I think that he is probably going to be criminally underrated in startup drafts, the RB1 is not anywhere in my range of outcomes for Zeke Elliott. So, Tyler, I love the hotness of your take. That's probably like ghost pepper, hot and spicy on that take. But I can't go with it. But this got me to thinking. So, according to his ADP on DLF, he's down there at RB7 right now off the board. What do you guys think about that? Do you think he will end up in 2021 higher than RB7? Rocky, you're muted.
Sorry. I was actually surprised he was at RB7 on DL. I've seen people so much more down on him than that. And I love him as a buy this offseason. I think he is definitely the first 5 games. Dak played the first 5 games. His point totals 27 PPR 27.7, 22.2, 17.8, 20.5, 23.5. So that put him at RB3, by the way. So he wasn't that far off from RB1 through those first 5 games. And I think I think Dak's gonna be back. I think you probably think Dak's gonna be back too, Josh.
Yep.
And I think with Dak back, I think that was the downfall. I mean, I know a lot of people said he hasn't looked as good, all these kind of things. The offensive line also had issues, and it's amazing how he didn't look as good after those first 5 games that Dak was gone. So I didn't hear anybody saying that through September. So I love it. I love Zeke. As like I said, as a buy for next year as a contender. I mean, he is getting up there, so the long term is a little bit of a concern, but. I think next year he could easily. I don't think RB1, but I could definitely see top 5. I'd be surprised actually if he wasn't top 5, assuming Dak is back.
Yeah, and it's funny, Rocky. You and I got this like weird mind melt thing going right now because I've been arguing with people about, why was he washed week 6 and on, but week 1 through 5, he was. No, it's just what Zeke does. He just goes at, and he was, he was averaging 8 targets a game while Dak was in there the first 5. And then I think it dropped down to like 4 targets a game or something like that with the Andy Dalton, Ben DiNucci, Garrett Gilbert combination they were throwing out there. So obviously, Dak likes to target him a little bit more in the pass game, which obviously is going to help his overall statistics. What do you think, Bill?
So there's a few things I need clarified. Is the line going to get better next year? Removing Dak from the equation, is there an expectation that their line will be better? Was there injuries that players are coming back from or anything like that?
Yeah, they at one point had all 5 of their offensive linemen out with injury, starting offensive line. So I'm kind of predicting health in this as well, but obviously they could.
Well, I mean they're not going to lose all of them.
Right. Most likely.
It's unlikely at least.
Right. Correct.
Okay. So in the first 5 games, Zeke had 6 of his 8 touchdowns, and that's really like a huge part of the point differential. So, it's not like he didn't have decent games in the meantime. It was just his usage kind of dropped in the middle there. That was probably when they had those crap games after Dalton got hurt. I'm cool with him. Like over the season, he was RB16. And I didn't look to see if there was any just 1 game outliers or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely not a bad buy at RB7. Like I think he's probably around there for me. Like I'm a little lower on him overall just because of age. Like if I was in a startup, I'm not grabbing him in the first round, or it'd probably be at the end of the second round before I'd even consider grabbing him. So I just don't like. If you're a contender, 100%, he's a good ad for next year. But you got to go in with the expectation, knowing that probably next year's the last year you get elite Zeke, and then after that you're going to be dealing with Todd Gurley, basically.
Yeah, and I love that poll, by the way, about the amount of touchdowns he had in those first handful of games. That was because that's not even something that I kind of picked up on when I was looking at this. So that's a good poll by you, Bill. I think you can expect some obviously some regression as he gets older. I think the good news with Zeke is that he hasn't really had any injuries throughout his career. So I know you mentioned Todd Gurley, and Todd Gurley had always had the knee problems, which, was kind of documented. I think there's going to be regression for sure, but I think his body type just kind of keeps him healthy a little bit. He's a shorter, stockier guy, so he doesn't get banged up as much. But I agree with you. In the next, year or two, you're going to see that regression just because he's older.
So I had this conversation at work today with one of my employees, and the we were talking about like Frank Gore. Has 16,000 yards, and I was just like, oh my god, like the fact that he has more yards than Barry Sanders is disgusting to me. And so I kind of looked up like yards per game, as opposed, because he's obviously played like 6 more seasons than Barry. Right. So I was kind of looking at like the top 10, and I was like, Zeke is really high on there. Now, granted, he hasn't played the years where he isn't in his prime either. So like there is, that's part of the reason, but he was really high on the list. And so I think a lot of people forget how good Zeke has been, and he's definitely catching a lot more passes than he did his second year. And so like he had 50 some this year. So I mean, it's not like, and that's in with a suspect offense for most of the year after Dak. So it's I think there's a lot more upside than downside to him for sure next year. And I don't necessarily mean Gurley as in the injuries. I just mean like he's getting to that age where it's going to slowly start to deplete, like just his production. So
of course, especially with the amount of touches that he's had in his career for Dallas. I mean, he's always among the league leaders. This year, probably not so much, but his first 4 years, he was always among the league leader in touches. And obviously that's going to wear on you. And I know there was some kind of stat that he, coming into this season, he had been an RB1 in like 90 or 92% of his games. It was kind of like a ridiculous number. Like, and the rest of those games, he was an RB2. It was just kind of crazy. So it doesn't shock me that he's kind of amongst the, the all-time leaders in yards per game and stuff like that. But that's going to be fun to see in startups, because I know people kind of feel like me, where I think he's being a little disrespected, and they're I think it's going to be about 50-50. Half of your draft is going to kind of feel like you, Bill, where you're kind of like, where do I want to take this risk, and where do I want to kind of put Zeke on my team?
Real quick, to your disrespect point, I always find this interesting too. I tend to look at the Superflex ADP on DLF. The RB7 is regular 1 QB.
Okay.
In Superflex, he's RB13. So I guess it is sort of 50-50 on whether how much disrespect he's getting. And if I can get him at RB13 prices, oh my God, I'm doing that all day.
I'll be like Bob Barker, Zeke Elliott, come on down. I'll call him down at RB13, man, because as long as Dak is back and he's healthy, there's practically no way he is RB13 on the season. So
his ADP is like mid-third round in December. So that's crazy to me.
Yep.
That's with quarterbacks in there because it's super flex, but even still.
I'm going to let everybody know, if I'm in a startup with you and you think you're getting Zeke in the middle of the third round, you're mistaken. I will guarantee you that you will not get Zeke in the middle of the third round. Now, if Bill and I co-own a team, it might be a little bit different. We might have some negotiations, some GM, assistant GM, discussions about that. But if you're muted too. We went 2 for 2. Come on, brother, unmute.
Well, we will be co-owning a team because we will be doing our listener league coming up, and so it is. I just want to make it official now that we will be doing our listener league, and our first shot will be to the FTC members. So you and I will be sharing a team, and we will not have Zeke Elliott on it.
Yeah, we'll see about that. Might have to pull I might have to do with what Outhouse did to Har, and just kind of a little clicky click when you're not around. But we're gonna talk. We're gonna go into that with a game plan, and I think it might actually be an interesting game plan. I've been thinking of some things in my head, Bill. I'll discuss them with you. I think you might like. It's not Zeke Elliott related, but some ideas I've had in my head that I think you might actually like. So. And if my ideas do come true, yeah, we probably won't have Zeke on our team. but no, man, that's a good one, and I like the way both you guys were thinking on that one. So let's go to the next one here. This is from Randall Kennedy at FF_Terminator. If you remember back to last spring, I told you guys that Quintez Cephas and Quez Watkins were two guys that needed some seasoning, but were worth more than a stash. Well, the chickens have come home to roost, and both these guys should be thrust into a larger role next year. And this got me thinking because, Bill, as you know, I was standing on the mountaintop shouting Quintez Cephas's name. And Quez Watkins was a guy that I thought was kind of interesting. But before we go onto that, this question from Lindsay is a good one here. Are you concerned about Pollard taking away some work away from Zeke and making him less valuable? I think that does have to be a concern because we saw when he was the main event for that one game, the yardage numbers weren't like, oh my God, popping off the screen, but he got into the end zone and he had a 40-yard run, so you have to see a guy and you have to see the ability that he flashed in that game and say that if the Cowboys are smart, which they're not always smart, they would lessen the load on Zeke and bring in Pollard for more work. But I mean, we've seen it kind of with two different coaching staffs now. They don't really take Zeke out. I mean, even when Zeke came back in week 17, Tony Pollard had a little bit of work, but he wasn't, Zeke was back and Zeke was in with his normal workload. So, yeah, I think you have to have a little bit of concern, but just kind of based off of what coaching staffs have done with Zeke his whole career, he's going to get the majority of the work.
And oftentimes when you see where they start to do these tandem, like backfields, each of the running backs gets a little more efficient because they're fresher and that sort of thing. So, there's a chance, like Eckler, he's a good example. Like when he was the full-time back, he was basically scoring about the same amount of points as he was when he wasn't, when he was part of a, tandem. And so it's just kind of one of those things where that could work. That could happen also, where Zeke's fresher, his legs are a little older, they're getting run down, but maybe he gets 20 touches instead of 30 touches, and he can do more with those. And maybe you see Pollard earlier in the game, and then you put Zeke in when the team's getting tired, and then that's that helps him out too. So it's. There's concern, obviously, but I think that you can argue that might actually be a benefit for him as well.
Yeah, and that's a great thought too, Bill, about efficiency, because we've seen it in so many situations. I mean, we saw it with the Saints when it was Kamara and Ingram, and even before that when it was it was Ingram and Reggie Bush. I mean, it was just kind of like, once you get both of those guys in, they're rotating in and out. You saw that both guys could still get theirs for fantasy because they weren't as tired. They weren't running into defensive linemen 20 times a game and trying to catch 5 balls on top of that. So, yeah, that's a good point by you, Bill. Rocky, before we kind of sidetracked onto Lindsay's question because Bill and I both saw it and thought it was a good question, so we wanted to answer it. But we were talking about stashes, and Randall Kennedy at FF_Terminator said that two of his guys that he was touting before the season was Quez Watkins for your Philadelphia Eagles and Quintez Cephas, who was the guy that I was shouting from the mountaintops before the season started. And we want to talk about maybe a stash or something that you were thinking about, a guy that you like that maybe could get bought on the cheap.
Yeah, there was 2 guys I thought of for this question. The first was Donovan Peoples-Jones. He's flashed already some this year, had some long touchdowns. I think OBJ is out of there, and that basically just leaves Landry and Rashad Higgins. So there's definitely some space in there for him. I don't know what their cap space is. I know there's some decent free agent wide receivers. But there's definitely a chance he could be as high as the wide receiver 2 for Cleveland next year. So I like him as a guy. Again, he's someone you can get super cheap. I don't think you'd have to pay more than a third for him. And the other one I was thinking of, maybe even a little deeper, is Adam Troutman for the Saints. He's not flashed as much as Donovan Peoples-Jones, but he's had a few plays here and there. We all know tight ends take a while to develop. The tight end they have, Jared Cook, is like 50 years old. So, and we don't, Breeze isn't going to be there, and we don't know what the offense is going to be, but maybe it favors the tight end even more with whoever comes in there next, whether it's Taysom Hill or somebody else. So, those are two guys I like. Neither one do I think you have to pay. You might even be able to get Troutman for like a fourth if somebody's, not really concerned about him. So, or as we always say, just get him as a throw in for some other deal. So those are two that I liked. I don't know what you guys think.
I like the Peoples-Jones one. And as far as their cap situation, they have a little bit under $30 million in available cap right now. So obviously we'll see with wheeling and dealing what they actually end up with. But yeah, I mean, they could go out and buy a wide receiver, but they could also fill some of the holes they have at other positions. So yeah, I definitely like the Donovan Peoples-Jones one. Bill, what about you? Who are your stashes? Who are the no-name guys that you're going after?
So this offseason?
Yeah, this offseason.
Okay, I think KJ Hamler's a good one. I mean, I know he's, he's kind of pops, so, I mean, there might be some people that are truthers and that sort of thing, but I think he's definitely the guy that, like, could end up being their big play, the Broncos' big play guy, and, I mean, the fact that he's popped and he's such a young wide receiver, I think he was the youngest wide receiver in the rookie class last year, like, I mean, that's a big thing, and so he's probably the top one. I mean, I don't know what you have to pay. Like, I mean, I imagine he's probably a late second, early third range, maybe. I mean, that's a guy. I do like Troutman. I think Troutman's a guy that you try to add before the rookie draft if you have extra spots on your roster, because there's going to be teams that are going to need to, make cuts and that sort of thing. So that's a perfect time to make a move for any of these guys, really, if you have extra spots to do that, rather than waiting until afterwards. But yeah, he's the first one that came to mind. I really can't think of anybody else that's like an obvious guy I'm going after this season, or non-point scoring season.
Nah, that's a good one, because that's not a guy I really put too much thought into. But if if the Broncos decide they're going to move on from Drew Lock and either, trade for Matt Stafford, which are rumors I've heard, or, maybe move up in the draft and try to get, Zach Wilson or something like that, and they decide that Drew Lock just ain't it, they're not going to go that route.
Well, they should think that already.
I mean, John Elway didn't, but now they're getting a GM. So, I mean, I can only go based off of John Elway's feelings right now until the new GM comes into town and kind of puts a stamp or not a stamp on Drew Lock. But yeah, KJ Hamler could be unlocked. There you go. We'll bring it all together with an upgrade at quarterback. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with Denver during the offseason.
That was John Bauer-esque.
Hey, listen, that's a good role model to have, all right? If there's one role model I can have, JB, I'm down with you, brother.
With Hamler, though, he has flashed this year, but do you worry with Sutton back, if everybody stays healthy, that he's like fourth or something in the pecking order?
I mean, there's always a concern, yeah. I mean, like, I think that Sutton and Tim Patrick are basically interchangeable, so I don't think that, like, all of a sudden Tim Patrick's going to be a thing next year, because the roles are similar between those two players. I think Tim Patrick's going to just be the fourth wide receiver. I think Hamler is going to be their slot guy. Deshaun Hamilton's probably out, and like Hamler's going to be that speed slot guy. And so, I mean, if you have an offense, I mean, it's the biggest concern is the offense as a whole, right? Like, how much volume are they actually going to get? But it's somebody I'm willing to take the risk on, because I think he's earned a role. I think he's, at least Mecole Hardman like, and so that's somebody I'm willing to roll the dice on to see if they, because I can't say 100% what his role will be, but that's the type of player I want to take a risk on And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. I mean, I'm not going to be paying a ton for him, but I think the upside's there, and I'm willing to take that risk.
Yeah, and it's not like you're looking for him to be a wide receiver one or anything. He could definitely, though, be that guy that goes off for like 4 catches for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns or something like that when you have to fill in a bye week or something.
Yep, exactly.
And if the Stafford rumors come to fruition, I mean, a guy with an arm like Stafford's, just seeing KJ Hamler getting open on a seam or something like that, and just hitting him, and knowing that the ball's going to land in his hands, all he's got to do is clap it together and bring it in. I mean, there could be a lot of touchdowns just off of plays like that. So that'll be interesting to see. But obviously, I was also yelling for Quintez Cephas, so still go ahead and pick him up. But another guy that I was yelling for last year that didn't perform, some of it due to injury, some of it due to just the way the offense was being run, Bryan Edwards. And that's a name that the people who love Bryan Edwards, they love him, and they're never giving him up for everything. But like everyone else, and I feel like that Bryan Edwards fan club is small right now, everyone else may be willing to give him up, at either as a throw-in, or that's a guy I'm willing to see. If I have a high 3rd round pick, I may knock on the Bryan Edwards owner's door and go, hey, like, we're in the draft, man. I have this 302. There are guys here that I know you like. Why don't you just give me Bryan Edwards? He didn't really do anything until the last game of the season, where he flashed and kind of maybe proved all the Edwards lovers right, at least for one game. But I think that's a move I might try to make, is trying to actually snag him during the draft, because people are going to be kind of hyped up on, whatever rookie hotness is out there. And, even if you want to throw the late second in there, the 211, the 212, and, snag him. And I think he can be really good. So, get yourself your Quintez. He's the only wide receiver on the lines right now. And, get yourself some Bryan Edwards, or some Donovan Peoples-Jones, or some KJ Hamler. We didn't really come up with like anything but wide receivers, which is cool. Who cares? But
I have one more who's also a wide receiver. I didn't mention him because I think he might have flashed too much to be considered a quote unquote stash. But if you can get Gabriel Davis, I love him going forward too, because he's already shown as much as he has. And I think John Brown's contract is up. I'm not positive about that, or they can get an out if it's not up. So he could definitely fill that role. Not that he's the same kind of player as John Brown, but another guy on the outside. So that was just another one I thought of. I tried to go a little deeper with it since it was a stash. So
yeah, and also go ahead. I'm sorry, Josh.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm sad. I tried getting Gabriel Davis in TA2, and this was like mid-season, so it was really before he kind of started showing out a little bit. And the owner was now I wish I had maybe thrown a little bit more his way, because he was a guy I was kind of targeting. But for John Brown, he is under contract until the end of 2021, and if they would cut him this year, he would be a $9 million. I'm sorry, he would be $9.75 million contract, or dead cap hit.
Okay, so not as good as I thought, but I still think. I mean, he's shown with John Brown's been in and out, but that's been John Brown's whole career too. So it's not inconceivable that Gabriel Davis could simply overtake him as the other outside guy, with Beasley in the slot and Diggs on the other side.
For sure.
And the other one, like, just to keep building these wide receivers to where you pretty much have no other positions on your team. Darnell Mooney, he had 90-some receptions, or 90-some targets for a later round wide receiver. I mean, they obviously like him. Like, a lot of people were high on Anthony Miller. I was when he was coming out as a rookie. But, I mean, he took over that second option. And if Allen Robinson ends up leaving, Like, I mean, I know he plays a different role than Allen Robinson, but he's already, as a rookie, stepped up and played a role for the Bears. And, I don't think their quarterbacking can be worse than it was this year.
I guess
That's
you're
it.
right. I'm just trying to think if it could actually be worse. I mean, Mitch Trubisky looked good the last few games of the season.
Boo.
There's talk that might lead to him coming back.
Yes, please. As a Lions fan, I am all for that. Of course, he torches the Lions because they suck.
I mean, the Bears really don't have another alternative unless you're just giving it all to Nick Foles. And I mean, you kind of saw what happened with Nick Foles throughout the middle part of the season. So, I mean, I guess if those are your two options, I guess Mitch Trubisky is the best one. I'll put a question mark at the end of that because.
But they didn't pick up his contract, right? They didn't pick up his 50-year option.
They did not.
So they would have to sign him to
Correct.
something. So maybe they sign him to like a kind of cap friendly thing, just so that they can get the chance to see if he's able to step up that 1 year. But. Right. Yeah, I mean, that probably makes the most sense, to be honest. I mean, he's looked okay, but he still looks like Mitch Trubisky. He's struggling in the same areas that he has, for his whole career. And it just doesn't seem like he's improved in those areas. Like, intermediate or beyond throws, his accuracy is just so terrible. But the fact that he's mobile, I mean, that's always going to make him look at least all right at times, But... yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. Like, I mean, it's not going to it probably won't get worse, but I don't necessarily think it's going to get much better unless somehow Trubisky, like a light switch, flips above.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think part of the light switch flipping has to do with Matt Nagy, and he probably saved his job with a playoff appearance. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't know if there's much hope for the evolution of Mitchell Trubisky. But we got one more. I think this is a good one to end from another DAP Network alumni, Dustin Church at Dynasty Junkie FF. Rocky, I think you may know him.
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably a forgettable guy, but I think we may have come across him once or twice. If you were joining a dynasty startup this year or starting your own, what are the main things you would want in your league? So, Bill, why don't we start with you first? You're getting into that startup groove and you're looking for something. What do you want? What does Bill want?
Good league mates. That's the only answer. Like, everything else, I'm okay with. 1 QB, it's not a deal breaker. Like,
off brand.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's truly come down to that. It's people that I want to play with and have a good time, and that are, if they're cranky, if they're, whatever. Like, if they're crankier than me, at least. I just don't want to deal with that stuff, and so it's just a matter of like the right people in the league now. Everything else is negotiable to me.
After the way you acted earlier, I don't know if anyone could be crankier than you, but
yeah, and I'm gonna be we're gonna be sharing a team.
Oh, great! My pleasant disposition and your crankiness, that should be the real odd couple. But Bill, you stole my answer because honestly, I'm all about just like who's in the league. Like, I love Superflex Army too because everyone in that league is just awesome. Everyone's cool. There's no like.
Wait, isn't Rocky in that league?
I am in that league.
Well, yeah. Like I said, everybody is cool.
Exactly.
Bill,
Bill my bad.
Bill's starting trouble this episode, man.
Listen, we Rocky and I figured out a way to get Cowboys and Eagles fans to come together, even if it's for a brief moment in history.
Against Giants fans.
Yeah, who needs those guys?
Hey, who called the division winner? Just out of curiosity.
Who called it?
I called Washington.
Oh, you did call Washington back in the fan. What was that, like a month and a half ago.
At least.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Let's not derail this more than I already did.
But that's why I love Superflex Army too. That's why I like trade addicts too that I'm in, because everybody in there, like, the chat is always going. People are joking around, having a good time. I'm in the Dynasty HQ one, the OG Dynasty HQ listener league. Everybody in that is super cool. That chat is always lit too. So I'm with Bill. Like, listen, probably the only other thing that I would probably say no, but if everyone was real cool, I'd probably say yes, is 2 tight end. Um, it's not a headache I want in my life, but I mean, if it was like another Superflex Army 2 or Trade Addicts 2, I'd probably do it because all the people in there are cool. But yeah, I'm just looking for, like, who are the people in this league? Like, am I going to get like 2 teams where like no one is freaking like switching out their lineup or answering trade offers? Like, get the hell out of here with that. Like, you can go somewhere else with that. What about you, Rocky? What are you looking for in a league?
I mean, that answer is a great answer, and I agree with the people thing. And I haven't searched out a league probably in over a year, but people ask me, and then I see who's in it, and I'm like, God damn, I got to add another league. so, so that happens to me too much. But I would say for me though, unless it was an extremely cool group of people, not super flex at this point is a tiebreaker. I'm going to add more leagues. I mean, a deal breaker. I'm sorry. Especially with how many leagues I'm in, I'm not really looking to add more. So if it's one QB, I'm not really that interested. And the one other thing I would mention, which is also not really a settings thing, is MFL. If it's not MFL, I'm not adding it at this point. I actually cut out almost all. The only sleeper league I'm in is one that's commissioned by Josh, and I told him he needs to move it to MFL. So
I'm actually. The funny thing is, I'm actually going to put in the league chat on Sleeper tomorrow. I'm going to put a poll up and see if I can get enough people to move it to MFL, because that is also my only sleeper league. So,
Josh and I shared a team in a free podcaster league. And we just bailed from that this year. And I have 2 other sleeper leagues, but I won money this year, so I kind of feel like a donkey if I bounce. So I'm gonna stay one more year. But anybody listening that's in that league, I'll be leaving next year.
unless he wins money again, and then he's gonna stay,
which is probable. What?
And yeah, I know sleeper has its truthers. It's just not for me. And the other one I've been in a couple leagues is Flea Flicker.
We all grew up with DOS programs, so that's why we like MFL.
Yeah, the older people just like MFL, I guess. I don't know. I've also been on Flea Flicker, and that's even worse than sleeper.
I disagree.
I can't stand Flea. You don't like it better than MFL, do you?
No, but I do. I don't mind. As a free service, Flea Flicker, in my opinion, is the best one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only benefit to both of those to me, is that they're free.
Correct. So all right, there you go. So Dustin, look for the non 2 tight end super flex MFL leagues, and you'll be fine.
I had a question from one of our FTC members asking me. They've been looking for getting into Dynasty. So they haven't played Dynasty before now, and they really want to get into it, and so they're seeing all these orphans available. And Josh is already shaking his head, and that was my answer. And they were asking if they thought, maybe grabbing an orphan in an already established league is a good idea, or if they should get into a league that is starting in the off season, like doing a startup.
Yeah, I'm with Josh.
Yeah, I think the 3 of us agree. Do your startup, because here's the thing. Like, I almost feel like doing a startup is the best way to go, because you're gonna make your mistakes and you're gonna learn from just that fresh slate. The team you drafted, you make your mistakes. Don't try to pick up a team and try to clean up other people's mistakes, because I think I know some people love the challenge of picking up an orphan, but I know when I pick up an orphan as a quote unquote seasoned Dynasty player, sometimes I'm even like, what the hell did I just get myself into? Like, why did I do this? Like, I should have just went to a startup instead of spending money on this. And, so yes.
I'm only picking up orphans now if it's a league I want to get into because I like the people in it. Like, that's the only reason, because you're starting from behind already because it's players you don't like, in my opinion. So you need to just build it the way you want to, like Josh said. And the member of the FTC, like, you already have a built-in startup that's happening this off season. So because of the listener league. So that's so the way to start out.
Yeah, I agree. In my first, I had a couple of home leagues before I really got heavy into Dynasty Twitter and adding crazy amount of leagues like I have now. And the first year I did a startup actually. I think my first startup was TA3 actually. When I started getting into Dynasty Twitter, I had 2 home leagues, and that was my first startup. But especially my first I know it was my first Superflex startup. But I also got an orphan that year, and I definitely think I still haven't really got that orphan to where I wanted to, because I didn't do that well with it that first year, because I had never taken over an orphan. It was Superflex, which I'd never done before that year. I think it was 2018. I had never done Superflex before then, and I know I think I sold some quarterbacks too low, and I'm still sort of recovering from that. I kind of tried to make it work, and then I was in the middle for 2 years, and now I'm rebuilding. I do have 5 firsts now, so hopefully I finally figure it out. But I definitely think it's a lot harder to make over an orphan as a new Dynasty player than it would be just to draft your team.
Yeah, I agree with all that stuff, and I think too with an orphan, the problem is that, especially as a new Dynasty player, if you make mistakes with a team that you kind of drafted in a startup, I think it's easier to recover. If you make mistakes with an orphan, you're kind of starting up behind the 8 ball, and then if you're making mistakes with that, you're putting your team even further behind the 8 ball, which could really turn you off to the whole experience. And honestly, like, Dynasty is so cool. It takes some getting used to, and it takes, like I said, there's the growing pains, but it's a lot more fun doing it from scratch than trying to clean up someone else's mess. So, all right, I think that's it. I think we hit all the high notes. Rocky, thank you for coming on, brother. Really appreciate it. Love you as the new co-host on Trade Addicts. Obviously, if for some weird and crazy reason you're listening to us and you're not listening to the Trade Addicts podcast, rectify that situation. Go subscribe. You're gonna have fun. You liked Rocky on this show, you're gonna like him even more on Trade Addicts. But Rocky, promote yourself, man. Tell everybody where they can find you, what you're doing, and what you're up to.
Yeah, I'm at Dynasty FF Addict on Twitter. My DMs are always open if you have any questions or anything. I'm always posting my nonsense takes on there, and it's still very surreal to hear me described as the co-host of Trade Addicts, but that's also
well earned, my man. Well earned.
Thank you. But that's the other place you can find me is on Trade Addicts. At Trade Addicts Pod on Twitter. Go follow that as well and subscribe to Trade Addicts and the DAP Network. I'm sure, like you said, most people are probably pretty aware of it. So, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun with Russ these last couple of weeks, and looking forward to a lot more.
Yeah, pretty much everybody knows about the Trade Addicts podcast. I'm talking to like maybe the 2 people that somehow haven't found the Trade Addicts podcast and are listening to us bring them along. But no, Rocky, like Bill said, well deserved. You're one of the smartest people out there doing this thing. You have a lot of insight, but you're also one of the nicest people. And we talked about this beforehand. Based on your rant on Trade Addicts,
I know it wasn't ranty enough.
You're probably the nicest guy in Philadelphia, which is is a good award to have. But nah, man, you're great. You and Russ have that natural chemistry already, and you guys are just gonna keep going up and up.
You're so nice. You probably never thrown a snowball at Santa Claus.
I have not.
But maybe you launched a couple batteries at JD Drew. So
I would have if I was there.
See, and that's a Philly thing. Bill may know about it. He likes baseball. He's into the. No, he's got no idea. Rocky and I know what the hell I'm talking about. And if you're from the Philly
All
area,
right, enough of this Philly shit.
you know what I'm talking about as well. So as Bill said, enough of the Philly shit. So thank you to everybody in the chat. We had Steve Dennis in there, Kevin, Lindsay Kennedy, tons of people were in and out. Appreciate you. Appreciate the questions in the chat. That always makes it a little bit more fun. Remember, if you're on the YouTubes watching us, subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we go live, because it's not only us, but there's going to be some other cool things happening on the DAP Network YouTube, and you just want to be privy to that kind of stuff. So hit that bell. And then if you're listening to us on podcast, thank you very much. We almost went for an hour and a half today, and you literally could do anything else in the world besides listening to us, but you did. So we appreciate that. Remember to subscribe. Tell all your friends and family to subscribe. Hit subscribe on grandma's cell phone. It doesn't matter. We're just here for the downloads. And then hit us with a rate and review so that more eyes can see us and we can see what we're doing great and what we're not doing great. And Bill, on that note, we are out of here.